The morning I decided to leave her, the sky looked deceptively calm, pale gold spilling to the curtains, the kind of light that usually promises warmth but delivers only silence. I remember standing by the window, fingers curled around the edge of the frame, watching the dust dance in the sunlight as if the air itself was holding its breath. Behind me, she still slept, or pretended to, her body face away, her shoulders rising and falling with slow, deliberate rhythm. For months, our mornings have been like this. Too quiet, too careful, like two strangers rehearsing a script they no longer believed in. The house had become a museum of our love. Everything was still in its place, but nothing felt alive anymore. I told myself I was leaving because I was tired, but deep down, I knew I was escaping before I broke completely. Loving her had become a habit, a routine of small sacrifices that no longer made sense. Every time I tried to reach her, she pulled away, not out of anger but indifference, which somehow hurt more. There's a difference between someone not loving you and someone not needing you. The first wounds your heart, the second erases your purpose. And by the end, she didn't need me at all. She moved through life like a queen in a castle built from her own pride, and I was just another subject she'd grown weary of ruling. I packed quietly, shirts folded with mechanical precision, books placed in a worn leather bag, my watch slipped into the pocket where her letters used to be. The sound of the zipper closing felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I waited for her to say something. Anything, but she didn't. Maybe she thought I wouldn't go. Maybe she wanted to test the silence that had already swallowed us whole. For a moment, I almost turned back, hoping she'd ask me to stay. But her stillness was an answer. Some people scream when they lose you. Others don't make a sound, and somehow that silence is worse. As I stepped out the door, the world seemed louder. Birds calling, cars passing, wind brushing through the leaves. It was strange how life outside still moved freely, while mine had been frozen in that house for so long. I didn't look back immediately. I walked until the building disappeared from view, and then, when I finally allowed myself to turn, I saw the curtains shift slightly. Just a small movement, barely there, like a ghost waving goodbye. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was the wind. But in that second, I realized that leaving wasn't the hard part. It was knowing she wouldn't come after me. The road ahead looked endless. Every step felt like walking out a photograph I'd once loved, the colors fading, the edges curling with time. I told myself this was freedom, that starting over was better than staying trapped in her indifference. But the heart doesn't heal through logic. It clings to memories even when they hurt. As I walked, I kept seeing flashes, her smile in the rain, the way she'd fall asleep on the couch waiting for me, the way she once whispered, "Don't ever leave," when love still meant something. I hated those memories for following me, yet they were all I had left. When I reached the train station, I sat on the cold bench, watching strangers reunite and part ways, realizing how many lives begin and end in such places. A part of me wondered if she'd notice I was gone, or if she'd just wake up, pour her coffee, and move on like it meant nothing. That thought broke me more than anything else. I didn't want her to chase me. I just wanted her to feel my absence, to realize that silence has a cost. But love, once neglected, doesn't echo immediately. It fades slowly, like a song you forget the lyrics to until it's too late. When the train finally arrived, I stepped in without looking back. The city blurred past the window, melting into streaks of gray and gold. Somewhere between stations, I whispered her name under my breath. Not to call her back, but to let it go. The echo of it felt foreign, almost hollow. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and allowed the rhythm of the tracks to drown out the memories. And yet, even then, a small voice inside me whispered what I already knew, that sometimes people only learn to need you after you've walked away. And on that day, without knowing it, I had already become the lesson she would one day regret. The silence that followed me was not peaceful. It wasn't the kind that comforts you when you're alone. It was the kind that stares back at you, like a shadow that refuses to let go. I spent the first few nights in a small rented apartment overlooking a street that never slept. The noise outside, honking cars, distant laughter, the hum of passing lives, only made the quiet inside my head feel louder. I thought leaving her would bring relief, That distance would give me clarity. But instead, it magnified everything I had buried. The words I never said, the moments I took for granted, and the truth that I still loved her, even when I no longer wanted to. I tried to distract myself with work, with books, with meaningless routines. Mornings were the hardest, because I'd wake up expecting to hear her footsteps, her soft in the kitchen, the faint scent of her perfume drifting through the hallway. But there was nothing, just the pale light seeping through unfamiliar curtains and the echo of what used to be. Loneliness is strange. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles quietly, takes up space, and soon becomes the only thing you recognize. Every corner of that apartment felt borrowed, temporary, like I was waiting for someone who would never arrive. Meanwhile, miles away, she must have returned to her life. The same house, the same coffee cup, the same mirror reflecting her face. I used to imagine her mornings without me. Maybe she'd sit on the edge of the bed, notice the empty space where my shoes once were. Maybe she'd reach for her phone, hesitate, and then put it down. Or maybe she didn't think of me at all. I told myself I didn't care, but each night my heart betrayed me. I'd scroll through old photos, her laughter frozen in time, her eyes bright with a warmth that now felt like fiction. The more I tried to move on, the more her absence defined me. There's a particular cruelty in realizing that the person you left behind doesn't chase after you. It makes you question everything, your worth, your choices, your place in their world. I wanted her to miss me, to call, to say something that would make leaving hurt less. But days passed, and my phone remained silent. Every notification that wasn't or felt like a reminder that love, once unspoken, becomes forgettable. Still, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Maybe she was hurting too, in her own quiet way. Maybe her pride was stronger than her pain. Or maybe she had always been better at pretending. One evening, about 2 weeks after I left, I walked to the river, the same one we used to visit during the early days when everything between us felt infinite. The city lights shimmered on the water, and for a moment, it felt like time had folded back. I could almost hear her laugh, the way she'd lean on my shoulder and talk about dreams too big for both of us. I stood there for a long time, letting the wind sting my eyes, pretending it was just the cold. That night, I realized something. Leaving someone doesn't end the story. It just changes the language of it. We stop being lovers, but the memory of her still narrated my every silence. Back in that apartment, I found myself writing letters I never intended to send. Pages filled with words I wished I had said before walking away. I wrote about the little things. The way her hair smelled after rain. The way her laughter used to save my worst days. The way her silence once scared me because it mirrored my own. Each letter felt like a confession to no one, a desperate attempt to empty my chest of her ghost. But no matter how much I wrote, she lingered. Some people stay not because they're meant to, but because your heart refuses to evict them. And yet, even as I drowned in nostalgia, something inside me began to shift. I started to see that love, at its core, isn't about being needed. It's about being remembered. I didn't want her to crumble without me. I just wanted her to realize what she had before it was gone. Maybe that's selfish, but love often is. It feeds on the hope that someone, somewhere, will finally understand your worth, even if it takes losing you to see it. And though I didn't know it yet, far away, in that house I had walked out of, she was beginning to understand just that. Because sometimes it's not the leaving that hurts the most. It's the echo that follows, the sudden quiet that reminds you that someone who once filled your world has vanished into silence. And that silence was finally starting to reach her. At first, she didn't notice. Or maybe she convinced herself not to. The first morning without me, she woke up to an unfamiliar stillness, the kind that lingers between walls after something living has left. The bed felt larger, colder. The indentation where I used to sleep had already started to fade. She stretched her hand across the sheets, half expecting to touch warmth, half hoping not to. But there was nothing, just the smooth emptiness of space that used to belong to me. For a while, she sat there in silence, staring at the sunlight crawling across the floorboards, wondering why the house suddenly felt so hollow, as if even the air knew something had shifted. She moved through the morning mechanically. Coffee, shower, work. Routine had always been her way of avoiding emotion. But that day, even routine betrayed her. The mug she picked up was the one I always used, chipped on the side, a small imperfection I loved. She caught herself tracing that chip with her thumb, lost in a memory of me laughing about how she should have thrown out years ago. Then came the drawer, my toothbrush still there, untouched. My cologne standing quietly on the shelf, scent fading with time. These were things she had seen every day, but now they screamed in silence, reminders of a presence that had vanished without a sound. By afternoon, she tried to distract herself, music playing softly, the same playlist we used to fall asleep to. But every song carried ghosts. Every lyric felt like something I had once said. And when she finally sat down to eat, she realized she had made too much food, 2 plates, out of habit. That's when it hit her. The kind of realization that doesn't arrive all at once but unfolds slowly, painfully, with every beat of the heart. I wasn't coming back. Not this time. I wasn't just angry or distant or taking space. I was gone. She tried to call twice, but stopped before pressing dial. Pride held her fingers still. She told herself she wouldn't be the one to reach out first, that if I wanted to talk, I wouldn't have left. But pride is a cruel companion. It keeps you company only to remind you you're alone. That night, she sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at our last conversation, the final text I sent her. Take care of yourself. 2 words. Cold. Final. The kind of message you send when you've already said everything in your heart, but can't bear to explain it anymore. As days passed, the silence in the house grew heavier. Even the ticking clock seemed louder now, like it was counting down to a truth she wasn't ready to face. Friends called, asking how she was. She said she was fine. She smiled, even laughed at the right times. But the moment the calls ended, she'd find herself drifting toward the window, the one I used to stand by every morning. She'd stare out into the distance, searching for something she couldn't name. Regret doesn't come like a storm. It seeps in quietly, through the smallest cracks in your certainty. On the 7th night, she couldn't sleep. The bed felt like an ocean, and she was drowning in its emptiness. So she got up, walked to the wardrobe, and opened the drawer I used to keep my things in. It was mostly empty. I had taken what mattered. But at the back, she found a small folded note, one I had written months ago but never given her. The paper was creased, faintly scented of the ink I used. It said, I don't know how to reach you anymore. I'm still here, but you're somewhere else. She sank to the floor, the note trembling in her hands. For the first time, the silence broke, not through sound, but through tears. They came suddenly, violently, like a dam giving way after years of resistance. Every harsh word, every moment of distance, every time she turned away when she could have held on, it all came rushing back. She realized she had mistaken my quiet for weakness, my patience for indifference. But I wasn't indifferent. I was exhausted from trying to love someone who only noticed my absence, not my presence. By morning, her eyes were swollen, her voice raw. She stood in front of the mirror and saw herself clearly, not the composed, untouchable woman she had tried to be, but someone fragile, haunted by the ghost of a love she had taken for granted. And in that reflection, she whispered something she had never said before. I need you. But the walls didn't answer. The phone didn't ring. The house remained still, as if waiting for forgiveness that wouldn't come. For the first time, she understood what I meant when I said silence can be loud. It echoed now, through every room, every breath, every heartbeat. And in that echo, she finally felt what I had felt all along, that the greatest tragedy isn't being left behind, it's realizing, too late, who was holding you up all this time. Days turned into weeks, and the silence began to ache like a wound that refused to close. The house had become unbearable. Too full of ghosts, too full of memories pretending to be furniture. Every corner whispered his name. Every sound reminded her of what wasn't there. She tried to escape it by leaving. Long drives to nowhere, walks through crowded markets where no one knew her story. But grief is a way of following you. It fits itself inside your chest, quiet and persistent. No matter how far she went, She could still hear his laughter echoing somewhere behind her, faint, distant, like an old song caught in the wind. Her friends noticed a change. She laughed less, smiled out of habit. They told her to move on, to let time do its work. But time, she was beginning to learn, doesn't heal what you refuse to face. It only waits, patiently, until you finally break. And break she did one evening when she returned home to find one of his old shirts tucked in the back of the closet. She had missed it somehow, a simple white shirt, soft from years of washing, faintly scented with his cologne even after all this time. She pressed it against her face and closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wished she could go back, not to change the big things, but the small ones. The time she looked away when he needed her gaze, the moment she stayed silent when he needed her words. That night, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She sat on the floor with his shirt in her lap and began to talk. Not to anyone, but to the empty space he had left behind. The words came out in fragments, trembling between sobs. "I thought you'd always stay," she whispered, "even when I pushed you away, even when I made it hard to love me. I thought you'd never leave." She pressed her palms to her face, the tears hot and endless. "You were always so quiet. I mistook it for distance. I didn't know it was pain." The walls said nothing, but the silence felt different now, softer, listening. She realized then that love doesn't die in a moment. It decays in neglect, in the days you choose not to care, in the words you hold back. She had watched him fade slowly, and she had done nothing. Maybe because she believed that love was permanent, that people who love you will always wait. But he hadn't, and now she was left with the truth that love, no matter how deep, eventually grows tired of being one-sided. The next morning, she woke with swollen eyes and a decision. For days she had lived trapped in regret. Now she couldn't bear another second of it. She needed to see him, not to beg, not to undo the past, just to tell him the things she never did. The thought terrified her, but staying silent terrified her more. So she packed a small bag, grabbed her keys, and drove. She didn't even know where to start. He hadn't told her where he went. All she had were fragments, the names of streets he'd once mentioned, places they used to visit. But sometimes the heart finds what logic can't. It's drawn to the places where love once breathed. As she drove through the city, she noticed things she had never paid attention before. The way sunlight spilled between the buildings, the way strangers laughed freely on sidewalks. It struck her how long she had been moving through life without really feeling it. He used to notice everything, the color of the sky before rain, the old man who sold flowers on the corner, the quiet beauty in ordinary things. And now she understood why. When you love deeply, you see the world differently. You live through it, not above it. By late afternoon, she found herself standing by the river. Their river, the one they had always gone to when words ran out. The wind was cold, carrying the smell of rain, and the water shimmered under a dying sun. She stood there for a long time, clutching his shirt, unsure she was too late. "If you're here," she whispered into the air, "if somehow you can hear me, I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I was wrong. I needed you. I just didn't know how to say it." And for a moment, maybe it was just imagination, she felt it, the faint warmth of presence, the echo of his silence. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something, a reminder that love doesn't vanish when people walk away. It lingers in places, in memories, in a fragile hope that maybe, someday, the paths that broke apart will cross again. As she stood there under the bruised sky, she realized she couldn't go back to the life she had before him. It wasn't about chasing or begging. It was about owning her truth. And for the first time since he left, she whispered a promise to herself. I'll find him, not to fix what's gone, but to tell him he was never forgotten. That was the moment she truly broke. Not into pieces, but into honesty. Because sometimes breaking isn't the end. It's the beginning of finally being real. She didn't know where to begin, only that she had to start somewhere. The morning after her breakdown, the city felt different. The air was sharp, restless, alive with a pulse she hadn't noticed in months. She walked through it like someone chasing a memory, every street carrying a whisper of him, The world hadn't changed since he left, but she had. Every sound, every face, every reflection reminded her that she was moving to the aftermath of a love she had once taken for granted. And though she didn't know if finding him would bring closure or chaos, she needed to see him, if only to tell him what she should have said before he walked away. Her first stop was the old bookstore they used to visit on rainy Sundays. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped in, releasing a wave of nostalgia thick enough to choke on. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, and a familiar scent of paper and ink wrapped around her like a forgotten comfort. She half expected to see him there, leaning against the poetry section, lost in words. Instead, she found only silence and strangers. She wandered the aisles, fingers tracing the spines of books they had once shared. On one shelf, she saw a copy of Letters to a Lost Love, the same one he had once bought her but she never read. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out, opening to the page where he had underlined a line years ago. Sometimes we lose people not because we stop loving them, but because we forget to listen when they go quiet. She stood there, frozen, tears blurring the ink. The world outside carried on, people laughing, talking, living, while she stood suspended in the ache of realization. She bought the book, though she didn't need it anymore. It wasn't just a souvenir, it was a confession. She left the shop quietly, the words echoing in her chest like a pulse that had been missing for too long. Next, she went to the cafe near the train station, the one they used to stop by before long drives. The same wooden chairs, the same chip blue cups, the same music humming softly in the background. The waitress recognized her, smiled faintly, and said, "He used to come here every morning after you stopped showing up." The words hit her like a wave. "Every morning?" she whispered. The waitress nodded, sat at the corner table, didn't talk much, always looked like he was waiting for someone who never came. Her throat tightened. She turned toward the window seat, his seat, and for a moment she could almost see him there, sipping his coffee, looking out at the street like it held the answer to something he couldn't solve. She sat down in his place, hands wrapped around the cup the waitress brought her, and let the warmth sting her palms. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She just stared out at the same street he once did and whispered, "I'm here now. I came back." But he wasn't. And that was the hardest part, realizing that sometimes love doesn't wait where you left it. Sometimes it keeps moving, even if your heart doesn't. By afternoon, she found herself wandering through the quieter parts of the city, the small parks, the riverbanks, the corners that once belonged to both of them. She asked herself if he'd already moved on, if someone else now occupied the silence he once gave her. The thought hurt, but beneath the pain was something purer, acceptance. Because even if he had found peace without her, she wanted him to know that she finally understood what his love had meant, that his quiet wasn't coldness. It was devotion, the kind that doesn't shout but stays. The sun began to set as she reached the edge of the river once more. The water shimmered like liquid gold, and she stood there, unsure if she'd come to the end of her search or just another beginning. She took out the folded note she had found in the drawer weeks ago. His words, the last pieces of him she still had. "I don't know how to reach you anymore. I'm still here, but you're somewhere else." She read it aloud softly, voice trembling. "I'm here now," she said to the wind. "I found my way back." For a while, she waited as if the river might answer, as if love might step out of fading light and forgive her. But all she heard was the soft murmur of water, the city breathing behind her. Still, something inside her felt lighter, like she had finally spoken the truth her pride had kept buried. She didn't know if she'd ever find him, but the search had already changed her. She was no longer the woman who measured love by attention. She was a woman who finally understood its silence. And as the first stars appeared above the city, she whispered into the dusk, "If you ever hear this, wherever you are, I still remember the sound of your silence. And I finally understand it. It happened on a Tuesday, not a special day, not a cinematic storm, not under fireworks or rain. Just an ordinary afternoon painted in shades of gray, when the world seemed to move slower, as if holding its breath for something it didn't yet understand." He was at the same cafe near the train station, the one that had become his quiet ritual. A book open before him, though he wasn't reading. He had stopped expecting anything miraculous from life. Love, for him, had become a memory he carried gently, like a scar he no longer hid but didn't show either. The world had moved on. So had he, or at least he thought he had. She walked like a familiar echo, hesitant, unsure she belonged there anymore. The bell above the door chimed, and he looked up out of reflex. For a moment, his breath caught. Time didn't stop, but something inside him did. She was there, the same eyes, the same quiet grace, but softened by something new. Humility, maybe, or understanding. The kind that only heartbreak can teach. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat neither of them moved. The world around them, the hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, faded into nothing. It was as if all the noise they had lived through had finally gone silent again, but this time the silence wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with everything they had never said. She didn't know what to do at first. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her bag. "Hi!" she managed, her voice soft, cautious. He blinked once, twice, as if making sure she was real. "Hi!" he replied, his tone unreadable, calm but not cold, just contained. There was a pause, long enough for her to feel her heartbeat echo in her throat. "Can I sit?" she asked. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "You always could." The words landed like both a kindness and a wound. She sat slowly, her eyes flickering across the table. The book, the half-drunk coffee, the folded napkin with his handwriting on it. He was still the same in so many ways. Quiet, steady, composed. But there was something different in his gaze. Not anger, not resentment, just distance. The kind that comes when someone learns to live without the thing that once broke them. For a while, neither spoke. The silence stretched, fragile but necessary. Then she exhaled, breaking first. "I didn't know where else to find you," she said. "You did," he replied softly. "You always knew. You just never looked." Her eyes glistened. "I was afraid." "Of me? Of what you'd see in me," she whispered. "Of how much I'd changed, or maybe how much I hadn't." He leaned back slightly, watching her. "You don't look afraid now." "I'm not," she said. "Not anymore. I came because I had to tell you I was wrong." The words hung between them like fragile glass. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she continued. "I thought your silence meant you didn't care. I thought love had to be loud. Words, promises, noise. But I see it now. You were quiet because you were tired of fighting alone. And I never saw that." She looked down at her hands. "You were trying to love me even when I made it impossible. I know that now." He didn't interrupt her. He just listened, really listened, the way he used to before everything fell apart. When she finally looked up again, her tears had already found their way down her cheeks. "I'm not asking for anything," she said softly. "Not forgiveness. Not another chance. I just needed to tell you, I finally understand." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "I used to wait for you to say that," he said, almost himself. "Every day, I hoped you would. But by the time I stopped hoping, I realized something. I didn't leave because you didn't love me. I left because I stopped recognizing myself trying to be enough for you." She flinched, not from cruelty, but from truth. And yet, there was no bitterness in his tone, only peace. She wiped her tears, smiling faintly through the ache. "You still speak like that," she said softly. Like every sentence could break a heart and heal it at the same time. He smiled for the first time in months. Small, tired, real. "I learned from you," he said. They sat there until the cafe began to empty, the golden hours spilling through the window and painting them both in soft light. There was no grand reconciliation, no dramatic confession. Just two people who had finally met in the middle of their silence. When she stood to leave, she placed the old book she had been carrying, Letters to a Lost Love, on the table in front of him. "Keep it," she said. "It belongs to both of us now." As she walked toward the door, he called out quietly, "Hey!" She turned. "Take care of yourself," he said again, the same words as before, but this time they sounded different. She smiled sadly. "I will. And this time, I mean it when I say thank you." The door closed behind her, and he sat there in the quiet once more. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one didn't hurt. It healed. Because sometimes closure doesn't come when someone returns. It comes when you realize they finally understand why you left. Weeks passed after that afternoon at the cafe. We didn't speak again, not because there was nothing left to say, but because for once, everything had been said. There was a strange peace in that, a quiet understanding that love doesn't always return to the same home it once left. Still, there were nights when her face flickered in my thoughts like a memory refusing to fade. I wonder how she was doing, if she'd found her rhythm again, if the silence between us had turned into something kinder. I no longer waited for her message, but I couldn't deny that part of me still listened for her name in the echo of every day. And then one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved but knew by heart. It was her. The message was simple. "Can we talk? Please." Something in the word please told me this wasn't just another attempt to rewrite the past. There was desperation in it. Quiet, fragile, human. I hesitated for a while before replying. "Where are you?" She sent me an address. It was the hospital near the river. My heart tightened. When I arrived, the night air was thick with the smell of rain and antiseptic. The corridors were silent except for the low hum of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes. I found her sitting in the waiting area, her head bowed, fingers clasped together as if in prayer. When she looked up, her eyes told me everything before her words did. Fear, exhaustion, regret, and something else. Need. "She's gone," she whispered. "Who?" I asked gently. "My mother," she said, voice cracking. "It happened this afternoon. I didn't know who else to call. And there it was, the day she finally needed me, not as a lover she lost, not as the memory she mourned, but as a person who once understood her better than anyone else. I sat beside her quietly, no questions, no judgments, just presence. That was all she needed. The same thing I used to give her when words were too heavy. For a long time we didn't speak. She leaned against me, trembling, the weight of her grief pouring out in silence. I held her hand, not tightly, not possessively, just enough to remind her that she wasn't alone. There were no promises, no rekindled romance, no false comfort. Just two souls who had once broken each other, now learning how to be gentle again. "I thought I'd be fine," she said after a while, her voice low and fragile. "I thought I could handle losing people. But when it happened, I couldn't breathe, and I kept thinking of you. The way you used to sit with me when I was angry or scared. You never said much, but you were always there." Her words trembled. I used to hate that silence. Now I'd give anything to have it back. I looked at her, the woman who had once needed everything except me, now holding on to the quiet she once ran from. There was something painfully poetic about it. Love had come full circle, not to reignite, but to redeem. "You don't owe me anything," I said softly. "I know," she replied, "but I owe myself the truth." She paused, tears gathering again. "You were never the problem. I was afraid of stillness because it made me face myself. And you were all stillness. You made me see parts of me I didn't want to look at." She exhaled shakily. "And when you left, I finally had to." Her honesty broke me a little, not because it hurt, but because it healed something I hadn't realized was still bleeding. I squeezed her hand gently. "We were both learning," I said. "You taught me, too, that love needs more than silence. It needs someone willing to listen inside it." Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, rhythmic. She closed her eyes and leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time, the silence between us didn't sting. It felt complete. Whole, like an ending that didn't demand explanation. Hours later, when dawn began to stretch across the city, she turned to me with tired eyes. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" I nodded slowly. "I have to." "Will I see you again?" I hesitated. "Maybe in another life. One where we learn to stay before it's too late." She smiled through her tears, the kind of smile that carries both pain and gratitude. "If that life ever comes," she whispered, "I promise I'll love your silence too. I smiled back, stood up, and looked at her one last time, not as the woman who broke me, but as the woman who finally understood. Then I walked away, and this time, the silence followed me like an old friend instead of an open wound. As I stepped out into the pale morning light, I realized something profound. Love doesn't always end when people part ways. Sometimes it simply changes shape. It becomes presence without possession, memory without pain. And that day, the day she finally needed me, I understood that I hadn't lost her. I had simply finished loving her the way she needed, quietly, completely, and enough to let her go.